Slick Electro Incorporated has been supplying jet aviation with dependable magnetos for many years. As one of the leading manufacturers of aircraft magnetos, Slick Electro has delivered over 12,000 magnetos as standard equipment on general aviation aircraft. The early 4000 series magnetos could not be serviced by the technician in the field. These magnetos were returned to the manufacturer for overhaul. A high-quality factory overhaul was provided at a substantial savings over the price of field repairs. Economics have a way of changing with the times. To meet today's changing conditions, Slick Electro has designed a new series of magnetos. The new 4200 and 6200 series Slick magnetos may be repaired or overhauled by qualified field personnel. This program has been prepared to help familiarize the technician with the maintenance and overhaul procedures for this new series of magneto being produced by Slick Electro. Field maintenance of the new 4200 and 6200 series magnetos is greatly facilitated by the use of the T100 assembly and timing tool kit. Designed specifically for magneto disassembly and reassembly procedures, the tools in this kit will help prevent damage to finely machined surfaces. Disassembly is begun by removing the cotter pin, nut, and washer that retain the impulse coupling. Next, the impulse coupling shell is grasped firmly and gently pulled outward. Use caution here as the shell is under strong spring pressure. Allow the shell to turn, releasing the spring pressure. Withdraw the spring shell and spring together. To remove the impulse hub, use the T106 impulse hub puller. Engage the tool in the grooves on the impulse hub. Carefully align the screws with the end of the shaft. The hub will be removed simply by tightening the screw, with no damage to the shaft. Remove the Woodruff drive key and discard all impulse coupling parts, except the nut and washer. The complete coupling will be replaced with a new part upon reassembly. Never put a used coupling on an overhauled magneto. Remove the screws attaching the distributor housing to the magneto and carefully separate the halves. Before the distributor housing can be removed, the condenser lead must be disconnected at the breaker assembly. The distributor bearing bar is retained by 2 screws. After these screws are removed, the bearing block and distributor bearing may be lifted out of the housing. Discard these parts, as new ones will be used at reassembly. With the bearing block out of the way, the distributor gear and distributor block can be removed. The used parts should be discarded, as their use would seriously affect the reliability of the overhauled magneto. Laying the distributor housing aside, let's turn our attention to this assembly of the body of the magneto. By inserting the body with the drive end down, the T100 tool will serve as a convenient holder. The first operation is removal of the distributor drive gear. This is accomplished very effectively by gently prying the gear upward with 2 flat blade screwdrivers. The drive gear will be replaced, so it should be discarded. With the drive gear out of the way, the breaker points can easily be removed. Start by removing the coil wire, then the locking screws and washers. The breaker point assembly can now be lifted out and discarded. New points will be installed at reassembly. The 2-lobe breaker point cam is removed in the same manner as the distributor drive gear. Like the drive gear and points, the cam may also be discarded, as it will be replaced. Before attempting to remove the rotating magnet, the bearing clamp screws must first be removed. After the clamps have been removed, the housing must be removed from the holding fixture. Hold the housing, drive end up, in your hand. Using a soft mallet, tap the rotating magnet from the housing and catch it in your hand. Do not allow it to fall on a hard surface. Reach down inside the housing and remove the bearing washer and loading spring. These are expendable items and must be discarded. Carefully press the rotor bearings off of the shaft. Discard the ball bearings and the washer, as these parts must be replaced. Place the rotating magnet in a suitable keeper. This keeper should be made of a soft iron. Place the housing back in the T100 fixture. Using the T122 coil wedge extractor and a small hammer, remove the coil wedges. A light, sharp blow is all that is generally needed. The coil may now be removed by simply lifting it out. The coil wedges should be retained for later use. The used coil should be discarded. A new coil will ensure reliability in the overhauled magneto. The disassembly of the magneto body is complete when the air vents and oil seals have been removed. Use the drivers supplied with the toolkit to remove them. Inspect all threaded parts, both internal and external, for signs of damage. Look carefully at the threads on the end of the shaft. Any sign of damage or deformation is cause for rejection. The bearing plate should be inspected for signs of damage. It should also be measured for wear. An inner diameter in excess of 1.5752 inches is cause for rejection. The rotor keyway should also be inspected for wear or damage. In addition, the rotor bearing surfaces must be measured for wear. An outer diameter that is less than 0.6990 inches or any damage to the keyway is cause for rejection of the rotor. The magneto frame bearing must also be measured. Using an inside micrometer or a telescoping gauge, make sure that the inner diameter is not over 1.5741 inches. Any reading in excess of this diameter calls for replacement. Inspect the magneto frame and distributor housing for cracks or other signs of damage. No structural repairs are permissible. Any items that show signs of wear or damage must be replaced. After disassembly and inspection, all reusable parts must be cleaned. Use clean Stoddard solvent or any popular brand of safety solvent. A thorough scrubbing will remove all traces of accumulated grime. Use compressed air and a safety nozzle to dry all parts. Before reassembly can begin, the required replacement parts must be on hand. These parts must, according to the manufacturer's directions, be replaced at overhaul. Regardless of the appearance of the parts you remove, replace them. To reuse any of these parts is a direct violation of the FARs. Before using the slick T100 base as a timing tool, it is necessary to align the index plate on the bottom of the tool. The correct number for the magneto model being timed will be found in the overhaul manual. On this model, the number is 66. In timing a 6210 or a 6214 magneto, it will be necessary to remove the spacer, T509. This will allow the impulse coupling lugs to engage in the slots in the index plate. It is necessary to engage the lugs and slots to properly time the magneto in the E-gap position. The first step in reassembly is setting the magneto frame in the assembly stand. Insert the new coil, making sure that it fits all the way back against the stops. Next, insert the coil wedges between the bridge and the frame. The coil wedges are tightened with a light hammer and a flat punch. One medium sharp blow each is all that is required. It isn't necessary to beat them to death. After the coil wedges are properly installed, the coil ground wire should be installed. A lock washer should be used under the attaching screw, and the screw torqued to 20 inch-pounds. Using a suitable straight edge and a scale, measure the vertical portion of the high-tension coil lead. It should project a 1/16 of an inch beyond the face of the frame. This measurement is most important as it provides the spring pressure against the thrust bearing in the distributor block. Now, remove the magneto frame from the T100 base. In order to assemble the bearings, it will be necessary to insert the T117 plate and the T119 adapter plate bushing into the base. Carefully unwrap both new bearings and assemble them on the rotor shaft. Make sure the grease shields of both bearings are placed toward the magnet. If installed incorrectly, the interior of the magneto will be contaminated. Place the rotor into the base plate with the threaded end down. Using the bearing assembly lug T109, turn the screw down until both bearings are seated firmly against the rotor shaft. Remove the T117 plate and the T119 adapter bushing from the frame. Place the magneto housing back into the T100 base and install a retaining washer in the bearing bore. Be sure the raised side of the washer is against the frame. Next, place the loading spring into the bearing plate. Be sure that the flat side of the spring is down. The function of the loading spring is extremely important. It provides the rotor bearing with the proper preload. Without the proper preload, high-speed bearings will destroy themselves in a very short time. By using the loading springs, the complicated process of shimming to obtain the specified preload is eliminated. Now install the bearing plate on the rotor by hand. Be sure to keep the bearing square with the bore of the plate. With this done, install the rotor assembly in the frame, threaded end down. Using the rotor and frame assembly plug T102, press the bearing plate down until it bottoms in the frame. Be very careful to keep everything in alignment. Use a steady pressure and don't force the parts into place. Install the bearing plate clamps with screws and new lock washers. The screws should be torqued 20 to 24 inch-pounds while the plug is still applying pressure. Now reverse the magneto in the base so that the mounting flange is facing up. Lubricate the seal with light grease and assemble it over the rotor shaft. Use the oil seal assembly plug T103 to press the seal flush with the frame of the magneto. While the magneto is still out of the base, install the woodruff key into the rotor slot. Visually inspect the new impulse coupling for shipping damage and install it on the tapered shaft. Make sure the key slot aligns with the woodruff key and push the coupling on as far as you can. Install the impulse coupling washer and attaching nut. Torque the nut at 120 to 300 inch-pounds. After making sure that the coupling is seated properly, safety the nut with a cotter pin. Make sure the coupling is free to rotate by snapping it through several times. Some magneto installations do not use an impulse coupling. To properly time these gear-driven magnetos, it is necessary to use the timing adapter from the T100 kit. When a gear is installed in place of the impulse coupling, a special nut must be used. It is impossible to install a cotter pin if a standard retaining nut and washer is used. Assemble the new contact point kit on the bearing plate. Tighten the locking screw only enough to prevent any motion of the contact assembly. Attach the coil wire to the bronze-colored terminal of the point assembly. Magneto points, like all electrical contacts, should be handled carefully. If the contacts themselves are touched with the hands, the possibility of arcing or burning is increased. To install the cam in the cam slot of the rotor, start it by hand. To fit the cam all the way to the bottom of the slot, use a flat blade screwdriver. Gently tap the screwdriver until the cam bottoms completely. Place the distributor drive gear on the rotor. Make sure the key slot of the gear fits into the cam slot of the rotor shaft. To seat the gear completely, tap gently with a hammer. The gear is properly installed when it bottoms on the shaft. Through simplified design and the T100 timing tool, timing is easy. Make sure the impulse coupling lugs are in the slots of the index plate. Twist the magneto body counterclockwise until the body contacts the stop pin. The rotor and cam are now in the E-gap position. Attach one of the colored wires from the timing light to the bronze point terminal. The black wire should be grounded to the magneto frame. With a screwdriver, adjust the points so that they just break with the magneto in the E-gap position. Point breaking will be indicated by the timing light illuminating. Tighten the screws on the contact set and recheck the point opening. Sometimes tightening the screws will cause a change. Point opening for these magnetos is very critical. When setting the breaker point opening, be sure to remain within the specified tolerance, 8 to 10 thousandths of an inch. The most efficient spark occurs at this point opening. Complete the installation by applying M1827 cam grease to the cam lobes. Apply the grease sparingly. Excess grease can contaminate the points. Installing the condenser in the distributor housing requires a degree of caution. The threaded condenser housing cannot simply be screwed in. The lead must be rotated with one hand while the condenser is tightened with the other. If they are not turned together, the lead will twist. Just a few broken strands in a lead will change its effectiveness and alter magneto operation. The distributor block and gear assembly must be replaced at each overhaul. The new assembly comes pre-lubricated and may be installed as is. To join the magneto and distributor sections, first connect the condenser wire to the terminal on the point assembly. Secondly, depending on rotation, the L or R mark on the distributor drive gear must be aligned. The appropriate mark should point toward the high-tension lead of the coil. To properly time the distributor section, insert the timing pin through the L or R hole in the front of the distributor block. The timing pin should extend through far enough to be inserted into the identically marked hole in the distributor gear. With the L or R marks aligned properly, fit the two halves together. Start by fitting the top boss next to the vent. If the parts are mated in this manner, there is less chance of bending the high-tension lead from the coil. To complete the overhauled assembly, all that is necessary is to install the 4 retaining screws. To assure reliable operation between overhaul, routine inspection and maintenance should be performed on the magneto. At each 100-hour or annual inspection, whichever comes first, the magneto to engine timing should be checked. This is a simple procedure and is outlined here. With the magneto switch off and the P-lead grounded, turn the crankshaft in the direction of rotation until the number 1 cylinder is in the full advance firing position. Follow the procedure outlined by the aircraft manufacturer. Loosen the magneto mounting bolts and connect a timing light between the engine ground and the magneto condenser terminal. The magneto switch should now be placed in the on position. Rotate the complete magneto opposite to the normal rotation of the magneto on the engine mounting until the timing light indicates the breaker points are opening. Secure the magneto in this position. Be sure to turn the magneto switch off. At 500-hour intervals, the contact point assembly should be checked for burning or wear. If the points are not discolored and have a frosty surface around the edges, they are functioning properly and should not be touched. If the points are blue or pitted, this indicates improper operation. Replace the faulty points and the condenser. The cam should be greased sparingly using M1827 cam grease. Check the distributor gear carbon brush for wear by measuring the brush length from the distributor gear shaft to the end of the brush. The minimum acceptable length is 1/32 of an inch. Worn, cracked, or chipped brushes must be replaced. Put a drop of SAE-20 machine oil on each oil light bearing in the distributor block and bearing bar. As you can see, the Slick Electro Series 4200 and 6200 magnetos represent a new age in serviceability. By following proper maintenance and overhaul procedures, you, the technician, can help assure the reliable, safe operation of today's aircraft.